I was thinking recently, if you stand next to a commercial jet engine while the cowling is open, it's completely overwhelming.
Oh, yeah, just massive.
Right, but it fundamentally makes sense. Like, it's just engineering. You can physically see the titanium
Yeah, you
blades.
can trace the fuel line, see all the physical parts.
Exactly. You see how a gear turning here forces a belt to move over there, which, fires a piston and eventually generates thousands of pounds of thrust.
It leaves a very clear, undeniable trail. I mean, if the engine fails, a mechanic doesn't guess about the mood of the airplane.
No, of course not.
They just trace the physical steps backward until they find, like, the snapped belt or the leaky valve.
But then you step into the world of massive, human-built bureaucratic systems, specifically the court system.
Oh, that's a whole different beast.
Yeah, and suddenly that incredibly powerful machine becomes completely invisible. I mean, we see pieces of paper go into a giant building with marble columns, and real-world consequences come out the other side.
Someone loses their freedom, or a family is separated.
Right. Life-altering fines are issued. We see the thrust, but the actual gears, they are hidden entirely behind dense legal language, closed-door chambers, and just layers of procedure.
And people assume the court is this, black box of complex moral judgments.
Totally.
And when everyday people are forced to interact with that black box, they almost always look for the gears in the exact wrong place. They try to understand the machine by trying to understand the morality of the machine.
Which brings us to our mission for today's deep dive. Welcome, everyone. We are looking at a fascinating source document today, outlining a concept it calls bare-bones court study.
It's really a radical approach, honestly.
It is, because our goal today is to strip away all emotion, all philosophy, and all personal belief. We're going to play Socrates today, asking targeted, logical questions to guide you through this. We're going to look at the court the same way a mechanic looks at that jet engine.
Which is the only way to get real results.
Okay, let's unpack this. To understand how the system works, we first have to understand why so many intelligent people completely misread the room when they tried to defend themselves.
Right. So the source document introduces a brilliant framing for this. It divides how people react to the court into two distinct paths: the inward lane and the outward court process lane.
Okay, so what happens in the inward lane?
Well, when someone is hit with a lawsuit or a criminal charge, the natural human instinct is to immediately drift into that inward lane.
I mean, getting served with papers is terrifying. Your heart rate spikes. Your livelihood is threatened.
Naturally. And so the inward lane asks questions centered on the human experience, like, why is my ex doing this to me? Did the judge sound offended when I spoke?
Or, is this suffering I'm going through actually some kind of spiritual test?
Exactly. Or, for the more academically inclined, it drifts into heavy theoretical analysis. Like, does the Latin root of this legal term prove that the court has no jurisdiction over me?
Oh man, I see that all the time in online forums. People posting these massive dissertations on the historical definition of a word, convinced that if they just drop this ancient etymology bomb in the courtroom, the judge will throw their hands up and dismiss the case.
Right, but the document is careful to note that the inward lane isn't inherently bad. Processing your fear, understanding your spiritual resilience, or knowing history, those are all valuable human endeavors.
Sure.
But the danger arises when that inward reflection replaces the outward lane, because the outward lane is the only place the court actually operates.
It's the mechanic's view.
Exactly. The outward lane is purely process-driven. It asks mechanically, what specific piece of paper moved today? What exact claim was printed on it?
What physical evidence was attached to support that claim?
Yep. And what consequence legally followed?
So it's the difference between asking, why is the universe letting this happen to me, versus how is this piece of paper legally converting into a freeze on my bank account?
Perfectly said. And the text outlines how getting stuck in the inward lane creates specific traps. The most profound one it identifies is ascetic drift, or spiritual bypass.
Ascetic drift. That's a phenomenal concept.
It really is. It happens when someone subtly turns the suffering of a legal battle into a badge of honor.
So to avoid the highly technical, boring work of correcting the actual legal process, they reframe the situation as a grand spiritual battle.
Right. They become, as the source brilliantly puts it, loyal to suffering instead of loyal to truth.
Wow.
They'd rather be the righteous victim of a corrupt system than, do the paperwork to mechanically defeat the claim.
But wait, let me push back a bit here. Isn't the court fundamentally supposed to be about truth, justice, and right versus wrong? I mean, those are deeply inward moral concept.
That's how we want to see it, yeah.
So if I'm falsely accused of something and I strip away all my belief in justice and my personal morality, aren't I ignoring the entire point of the justice system?
What's fascinating here is that we constantly project our human desire for justice onto a bureaucratic machine that was never designed to feel it. The court is a processing mechanism. It is not a moral philosopher.
Okay, walk me through that. How does that look in practice?
Think about a devastating hypothetical. A completely false, malicious accusation is filed, and it results in a parent losing custody of their children.
Horrible.
Right. Now, if you sit there and study the spiritual journey of that falsely accused parent, or analyze the dark psychology of the person who lied, that tells you absolutely nothing about the gears of the court.
It doesn't explain how a falsehood successfully became a legally binding custody order.
Exactly. To get real results, to reverse that custody order and get the kids back, you cannot argue that the universe is unfair. You have to study the mechanical bridge that allowed a piece of paper containing a lie to be processed by the machine as a truth.
That is heavy, but it makes perfect sense. The machine didn't hate you. The machine just processed the paper it was fed.
Yes, precisely.
So if deep spiritual truths or universal justice aren't what actually turn the gears, what is the fuel? If we are staring at the engine, what makes it run?
Well, when laymen first realize they need to study the mechanics, they often get sidetracked by the concept of possession.
Possession.
Yeah, the source document notes this is a massive rabbit hole. People spend years focusing heavily on who owns a word, who owns a legal name, or who possesses a specific duty.
Oh, right. The classic sovereign citizen argument, like, I do not own the all-caps version of my name on my birth certificate, therefore you cannot arrest me.
Right, and while possession and legal attachment do matter, they dictate how a legal label sticks to you. Possession alone doesn't explain the physical consequences.
Because a label can attach to you all day long, but something else has to compel the system to actually send someone to your house.
To take your property or limit your freedom, exactly. Something has to move the body.
And the source identifies that true driver, the actual high-octane fuel of the legal system, as risk and safety.
Risk is what moves the body. It forces custody, release, bail, monitoring, or restrictions.
If you listen to the vocabulary of any courtroom, you hear the mechanics of risk constantly.
Oh, everywhere. Risk to public safety, flight risk, officer safety concern, high risk, unacceptable risk.
But the document issues a massive warning about the word safety, though. It points out that safety can become incredibly elastic.
Very quickly.
It transforms from a tangible thing into a universal override code. It justifies entering homes without warrants, setting impossible bail, or creating exclusion zones.
And the analytical question isn't whether safety is important. It obviously is. But the outward lane question is surgical. Safety of whom? From what specific act? Based on what specific fact? Derived from what credible source?
Let's put this in perspective with a sort of Socratic analogy. If safety has no specific source, no specific fact, and no specific person attached to it, it operates like a magic spell in a video game.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
It just bypasses all the normal constitutional friction. So if I'm labeled a risk to public safety, how does the court magically justify locking me up without testing the claim first? How does the gear turn without a belt connecting it to the engine?
That gap between the complaint and the handcuffs is where the machine does its most dangerous work. The source identifies the mechanisms hiding in that gap as presumptions and skipped connections.
Okay, let's break presumptions down first. How I understand it, a presumption is like the autocomplete feature on your smartphone.
Okay, yeah.
You type the first two letters of a word, and the phone just assumes what you meant and fills in the rest to save time. If you don't actively hit backspace to delete it, the phone prints the wrong word permanently.
That is a perfect analogy. The court system has massive caseloads. It cannot afford to build every single factual bridge from scratch.
So it uses autocompletes.
Exactly. It uses presumptions to keep the assembly line moving. It presumes the name on the paper perfectly identifies the person standing at the defense table. It presumes a police summary is inherently reliable.
It presumes that if you refuse to answer a question, you are being uncooperative.
Or that refusing to open a door immediately means there is danger inside.
The system autocompletes the narrative.
Yes. But the system goes even further than presumptions. Sometimes it uses skipped connections, where it doesn't even bother to autocomplete the word, it just jumps to an entirely different sentence.
The jumps listed in the source material are chilling when you read them back to back.
They really are.
Like a call is placed, and the system instantly skips to treating the situation as a verified emergency. Silence skips to noncompliance. Questioning the process skips to obstruction.
An unproven breach allegation skips to a pattern, which skips straight to a remand into custody.
And those jumps are powered by a mechanical flaw the text calls faulty conversions.
Right. Conversion is simply how one thing morphs into another thing as it moves down the assembly line.
Let's make this relatable outside the courtroom.
Yeah.
This happens in corporate HR departments all the time. Imagine you walk into the office 5 minutes late holding a coffee.
The factual event is simply, employee arrived at 9:05 a.m.
Right, but the manager notes it in a file. The factual event converts into a tardiness report. A month later, HR reviews the file. The tardiness report converts into a label of time theft.
Wow.
And then the time theft label converts into a character issue. And the character issue converts into your termination. You were fired for a character issue, but the actual starting material was a 5-minute delay for a latte.
And that conversion was entirely faulty because the bridges connecting those leaps were emotional, assumed, or completely untested.
Right.
Now apply that HR analogy to human liberty. The text gives terrifying examples of faulty conversions in court. A witness statement treated as a proven fact. A numerical risk score treated as absolute truth.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. If the system is constantly auto-completing facts, skipping connections, and jumping from a phone call to a jail cell based on these faulty conversions, isn't the layman completely powerless?
It feels that way.
I mean, how can anyone fight an invisible bridge? If the gears aren't touching, how do you prove the machine is broken before it crushes you?
By doing the one thing the machine absolutely hates. You force it to slow down. You refuse to let the autocomplete function run unchecked. You demand that the invisible bridges become visible.
So practically in the room, what does that look like?
It looks like asking the specific, process-driven questions out loud. You ask what specific fact creates that connection and what finding actually adopts it.
Oh, let's role play that for a second. Let's say a judge looks at a piece of paper and says, based on the police summary here, the defendant is a flight risk. Bail denied.
Okay.
The inward lane reaction would be to yell, I'm a good person, I wouldn't run.
Which the machine completely ignores because being a good person is not a recognized input.
But the outward lane reaction, the mechanical approach, would be to say what?
You would say objection. Is the court treating the police summary as a verified fact without a sworn witness present to establish that risk?
Oh, wow. Wait, really? That freezes the autocomplete.
It does. It forces the judge to either admit they are making an untested presumption or require the prosecution to actually build the bridge by putting a witness on the stand.
But the source material makes a critical pivot right here. Asking those brilliant questions into the thin air of a courtroom is useless.
Completely useless.
Because the judge might just ignore you and move on. You have to put your challenge in the one single place the system cannot ignore.
The record. In the bare-bones map of the court process, the record is where the issue lives for later review. It is the hard drive of the machine.
Right.
If an issue is not saved to the hard drive, it never happened. A missing objection, it disappears. A missing ruling from the judge, it disappears.
And the text specifically warns against rushed plea deals. For this exact reason. When you take a rushed plea because you're exhausted and just want the suffering to end, which is that ascetic drift we talked about.
Yep, there it is.
You are converting all those unresolved, skipped connections into a permanent waiver. You waive your right to ever point out that the bridge was missing.
This is the absolute core of getting a reversal. Reversing a decision isn't about proving to an appellate panel that you are morally right. Reversal requires the mechanical issue to have been preserved on the record.
Right. The transcript must explicitly show the issue was raised, the objection made, the ruling requested, and the ruling given.
If it's not typed into the transcript by the court reporter, your reality does not exist.
That's wild. But the source gives a couple of great examples to prove that mastering this works. Starting with what it calls the false witness remand.
Yes. This involves incredibly serious stakes. Imagine allegations of stalking or a high risk of family violence. The text posits a scenario where a key witness is eventually completely discredited.
The person accused was entirely innocent.
A total nightmare scenario. And again, the inward lane approach just focuses on the tragedy of the false accusation.
Sure, the malice of the liar.
Exactly. But the Socratic mechanical study approach asks a much more useful question. What allowed that liar's words to carry enough risk weight for so long?
It asks, what independent evidence actually supported that risk label?
Right. If a person loses their freedom on false evidence, understanding the process that converted a lie into custody is the only way to expose the flaw in the machine and secure a release.
And what's brilliant is that the text argues this exact same mechanical study applies to much smaller stakes too. It calls it the administrative win example.
Yes. Think about fighting a convoluted municipal fine or getting a block removed from your driver's license by the DMV.
Oh, the DMV.
Right. People win those cases all the time, and they win them because they successfully correct the mechanical risk the agency assigned to them.
So if exposing a skipped connection about your risk forces the DMV to unblock your license, that same exact mechanical principle applies when human liberty is at stake.
The gears are identical. The machine is just louder.
So what does this all mean for the listener? Let me ask the toughest question here. Even if you are 100% morally right, if you don't secure the exact legal basis on the record before the step becomes final, it's as if your truth never existed.
I know it is a cold reality to accept, but yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate equation of the court is mechanical.
Let's actually trace that formula, because it is the literal blueprint of the machine. It starts with a cause, right?
It does. A cause gives an authority figure an excuse to make a claim.
And that claim requires a source who provides facts.
Which is where the autocomplete kicks in. Those facts generate a presumption.
The presumption creates an attachment.
Which generates a risk label.
And that risk label triggers a safety concern.
Then the faulty conversion happens. That safety concern converts into a finding.
The finding goes on the record.
The record dictates the consequence.
And finally, that consequence is subject to review.
But only based on the record.
Right. Cause, authority, claim, source, facts, presumption, attachment, risk, safety, conversion, finding, record, consequence, review.
That is the machine.
Personal belief changes absolutely nothing in that sequence. Only understanding and challenging that exact chain reaction yields results.
Your power lies entirely in your ability to slow that track down.
Okay, let's bring this all together. We started this deep dive looking for the hidden gears of an invisible machine. By stripping away our human instinct to rely on belief and emotion, we can finally see that massive bureaucratic systems operate on a rigid track.
A track of risk and conversion. And mastering it requires cold, mechanical observation.
And for you listening, you really have to think about how this applies outside the courtroom. What we've looked at today isn't just a legal guide. It is a masterclass in critical thinking.
Absolutely.
When you understand how vague words convert into real actions, you become immune to the magic words used by any authority figure trying to bypass facts.
Because the mechanics of risk, presumption, and faulty conversion are everywhere.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to ponder. If the court system, the ultimate arbiter of human liberty, operates entirely on these mechanical conversions of language rather than absolute truth, how many other massive systems in your life are doing the exact same thing?
Oh, that's a good question.
Think about your medical care, your financial institutions, your corporate HR departments. How many of them are quietly managing your risk, using the exact same skipped connections without you ever even noticing the bridge was out?
It definitely makes you look at every bureaucratic decision a little differently.
Oh, he really does. Keep your eyes open for the gears. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.